Today we're going to be talking about the dollar, and no, not that one. Rather, we are going to be discussing the sovereign dollar, which seeks to be the standard stablecoin for the Bitcoin economy. Why is this important? How did we get here? Where might we go from here? Today we break it all down. Let's jump in. All right, so quick bit of context for today's video. This is going to be part one of two. I'm going to do today's video where I go through conceptually things like the dollar stablecoin, the Zero protocol within Sovryn, and then be sure you are subscribed because part two that I will hopefully put out next week will be an actual tutorial on the Sovryn ecosystem. For those not familiar, Sovryn is a rich DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin. It uses the rootstock sidechain to Bitcoin, which is secured through merged mining, meaning all the activity happening on rootstock ultimately benefits in terms of miner revenues for Bitcoin. I have done a whole video on the general architecture of that, as well as Sovryn at a high level. So I would encourage you to check that out for a primer if you are so curious. But the overarching idea here is how do we bring sound finance to accompany the sound money that is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is amazing, but if we don't have the financial scaffolding around it, it is very unlikely that we ever get to hyper-Bitcoinization where we're using Bitcoin as this kind of true root of the monetary system. So Sovryn, super impressive. One of these just wildly underloved efforts in the ecosystem. And they probably are the most feature-rich DeFi ecosystem for Bitcoin. And furthermore, stablecoins or tokens that have their value pegged to something like the US dollar are, I think, a critical ingredient on this path. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're an end in of itself, but if we're proponents of free markets, all we need to do is look and see the $100 billion market cap for stablecoins. Like, there's clearly value and demand for this. You see this especially in emerging markets, which typically have harder access to get to dollars, which, even despite its gradual decline as a reserve currency, is still used rather ubiquitously and accepted ubiquitously around the world. So think of stablecoins really as this bridge that a lot of people are going to use to ultimately get from fiat land into Bitcoin land. And so I have been meaning to come back and cover the Sovryn ecosystem more. There has been a ton of stuff that's happened since about a year ago that I made that last video. And we saw this fascinating announcement that really prompted me to go ahead and do this. So Exodus, which is one of the largest wallet makers, they've got mobile wallet, they've got a desktop wallet, they can work with hardware wallets like Trezor. So I think in Bitcoin land where people are very much used to thinking about cold card, this and that, my hunch is that Exodus is far, 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 far bigger, right? This is like more like a ledger type size entity. And interestingly enough, they are a publicly traded company. And they have announced that they are putting Sovryn's dollar stablecoin into their corporate treasury at 25% of their quarterly interest income. Which is pretty fascinating because for a lot of people that see this highlight, they're probably like, well, what on earth is the Sovryn dollar? And so that is what we're going to break down today. So there have been a wide range of stablecoin designs and implementations over time, and typically they face one or several of a few key weaknesses. One is that they might be completely centralized, right? And a good example of this would be Circle's USDC, or Tether would be another example, right? And so what this means is that these are not fully permissionless. Circle could at any time, or Tether could at any time, implement whatever restrictions that they want. So despite the fact that those stablecoins have had probably the longest staying power as well as command the highest market cap, there's still that like pretty significant and notable downside. The second potential weakness is that they are backed by inferior collateral. We saw some of this with the Terra USD structure with the whole Luna debacle and collapse back in 2022. And that particular example also suffered from a third flavor of weakness, which is that the peg mechanism, the mechanism and or set of incentives through which the stablecoin maintains stability is flawed or broken. And so you'll typically see either collateralized stablecoins that could be collateralized by fiat in the case of the centralized category we discussed, or you might have these like algorithmic stablecoins that are not collateralized and that rely on these kind of dynamic peg mechanisms to maintain stability, which have for the most part always failed and proven to blow up. So it begs a question, is there a world where we can produce a truly decentralized, truly permissionless, censorship-resistant stablecoin that ideally is backed by Bitcoin? And the good news is, yes, there are a couple examples of this. One is what's called Dollar on Chain. This is managed by the Money on Chain protocol, which is the second most used protocol within the rootstock broader ecosystem, second to, of course, Sovryn. And really, this is backed by what's called RBTC, or the pegged version of Bitcoin that you get when you peg into the rootstock sidechain. I cover all of that in the earlier video that I referenced. So do take a look at that because that is really important. And there's also differences between how rootstock as a sidechain manages two-way pegs versus how something like Liquid as another sidechain to Bitcoin manages two-way pegs. I personally think rootstock has the better set of trade-offs and the better technology, but that's what's happening, right? You're pegging into the rootstock sidechain, you're depositing Bitcoin, you're getting RBTC, which is always redeemable one-to-one back to Bitcoin. And then that RBTC is what's being used as gas throughout these different smart contract protocols within broader rootstock. So you've got Dollar on Chain, and that's publicly auditable, very transparent. So that is nice, right? You can always look at the collateralization behind this thing. And then you also have something called ZUSD. And this is the stablecoin that is minted when you borrow through the Zero protocol. Now, some of you may have seen this. This was a huge release and announcement from Sovryn not too long ago. And so I'm going to comment as a little bit of a sidebar on the Zero protocol. And then again, be sure you're subscribed because I'm going to do a tutorial on it and a couple of the other different pieces within this Sovryn ecosystem as my next video. But Zero is a decentralized protocol that allows you to borrow against your Bitcoin with 0% interest. So how this works, again, you've pegged into the system, so you have your RBTC, and then you are locking up your RBTC as collateral. This is an over-collateralized stablecoin, so you have to maintain a collateralization ratio of 110% in collateral to the loan amount that you are borrowing in the form of ZUSD. And then there is an origination fee as well as a redemption fee. So do be aware of that. Even though there's no interest, you're still going to pay typically between 2.5% to 5%, it would seem, in those fees, which is not nothing. But at the same time, this is a massively powerful tool for people to have in their disposals. This really is one of the core secrets to how the mega wealthy become and maintain their wealth over time. Think of having this amazing, pristine asset like Manhattan real estate, right? How the wealthy do this, because that asset is going to continue to appreciate over time, particularly as, you know, depreciating dollars are being measured against it. What the wealthy are able to do is they're able to say, hey, I'm going to borrow, you know, $1 million against this piece of property. I'll use that to live off for this year. And then guess what? By the time they get to next year, the value of the underlying collateral has increased. And so they're able to take out an even bigger loan on that collateral, pay back the old loan, and then live off, right? And rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. So this is like one of the ultimate tools and tactics. And this is a really powerful tool to have in your disposal. Hey, like what if I need to raise fiat for something, right? We're not at hyper Bitcoinization yet. And so there could be a medical emergency. There could be some family emergency, something where you need to raise some fiat liquidity, but you don't want to sell your Bitcoin because that would be stupid. So what you could do is borrow against it. And again, there's other tools that you can use to do this. There's things like Ledin, which is more of a company, but this allows you to borrow this stable coin in a trustless, permissionless way with no interest. That is a humongous deal. Now, again, we're not at the holy grail just yet because it's like, well, what can I really do with the ZUSD? Like, I can't put that in my bank account and use it to pay my hospital bill or whatever it is. And you would be right. There are a couple other conversions and hops you can do to get that ZUSD into actual USD that you could put into your bank account. And there's also an early stage startup called Sovryn Financial that would seek to just like mobile app, boom, let you do the zero protocol, borrow against your Bitcoin all in one fell swoop and deposits actual dollars into your bank account. That for me would be a massive, massive tool for Bitcoiners. But I digress. So we'll come back to the zero protocol in the later video. But now let's talk about dollar, right? We've talked about these couple of Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. So what dollar is actually an aggregation of these different Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. And the reason this is powerful is that different stablecoin mechanics are going to have different trade-offs. For example, the dollar on-chain stablecoin allows for instant atomic redemptions of dollar on coin for Bitcoin, but the trade-off is that you're typically going to have a higher collateralization requirement. So that makes it a little bit hard to scale, right? Zero, on the other hand, has a more favorable collateralization requirement, but doesn't provide quite the same atomic redemptions that dollar on chain does. And so these are different mechanics for assuring stability. When people say stable coin, it's like, well, how do I assure that the value is what I want it to be, which is equal to, you know, one sovereign dollar is equal to one USD. And the way you do that is through arbitrage, where people can, if, for example, the price creeps, you know, a little bit up and it's actually $1 equals 1.01 sovereign dollar, then people are going to mint more sovereign dollars because $1 gets them more than that in sovereign dollars, and the peg gets maintained through these different market actions. So different mechanics have different trade-offs, and so by aggregating these, you're sort of blending it across it. And I think that's actually really nice. It's a nice diversification. You sort of have this basket of Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. And so we can see a hypothetical example of this, right? You have this aggregation from other Bitcoin-backed stablecoins pegged to the USD through these various mechanisms we've just described. And so the process by which dollar gets issued is through something called the mint protocol, which is what does the aggregating and conversion. So for example, you could mint your ZUSD from zero and then convert that into dollar, for example. Again, we'll talk through the sort of how-to for that in the tutorial video that will follow this. So ultimately, dollar has a number of attractive properties. It is truly decentralized. It's uncensorable. No one can stop you from using it. It's 100% backed by Bitcoin. And by blending together these different constituent stablecoins, the idea is that it should be more resilient over time. So exciting stuff. Let's now conclude today's video and talk about where all of this may head next. All right, so today we talked about the sovereign dollar. We briefly alluded to the tech stack in which this is all embedded. Rootstock sidechain, sovereign. Again, check out my prior video on all of that and be sure to subscribe because we will be doing a hands-on tutorial on a lot of this in the next video. We took a look at the logic behind dollar, and make no mistake, we also talked about the market demand behind stablecoin. Some of you watching may say, well, like, you know, whatever, I don't care about this. All I care about is my Bitcoin. But trust me, even aside from the kind of emerging market use cases for stablecoins we talked about earlier, for our startup jolts, like we can't even get paid by one of our Canadian customers right now. I mean, it has been like a week-long saga just to find the right method to transfer value. I mean, it is a nightmare. So the traditional legacy banking system is horrific, make no mistake. And so for a variety of reasons, I think you'll see stablecoins serve an important role, particularly on this bridge from fiat land to Bitcoin land. And I really like the vision of the sovereign dollar to be the standard stablecoin for the Bitcoin economy. And so dollar is going to be made available across the Exodus ecosystem. I think that's a pretty big deal. You'll be able to hold the sovereign dollar in your Exodus wallet. I haven't done a tutorial on Exodus, but I probably will at some point. Will you see other entities see the merit of this and also adopt a similar treasury strategy as Exodus? Keep in mind that the more activity for the RSK sidechain, the more that Bitcoin miners benefit because it's a merge mined sidechain. So this gives yet another revenue stream for miners, which goes back to my last video around the Bitcoin security budget and is Bitcoin security doomed? Check that out as well. And we will see other Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. We will surely see something via Taproot Assets, right? What was formerly called the Taro protocol, it's now called Taproot Assets. And so that will unlock fungible tokens like stablecoins riding on Lightning Network rails. So that could become a component of the sovereign dollar as well. And so really this is forming, I think, a key ingredient in addition to, for example, the risk-free rate of Bitcoin that we discussed a few videos back with the Lightning Network rate published by Amboss. So the point is, all these different ingredients are really starting to come together in a way that is credible. And I think it is wildly exciting to see. But I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts? What do you think of the sovereign dollar concept? What do you think of sovereign more generally? Are there other related topics you'd like to see covered in future videos? Let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you found this valuable and insightful. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like. Use the share feature underneath this video. That really does help get this to a broader audience. And I think it's really important for people to be aware of these tools. Even if you may or may not have an immediate use case for them, it's likely you will at some point, or maybe someone that you know will at some point. This is a critical tool to have in our arsenal, to have in our tool belt. Sound finance that accompanies sound money. And if you are so enamored with this video and you want to donate to a pleb, which really does help me continue to make these videos, you could do so in a number of ways. There's the super thanks feature built directly here into YouTube. If you happen to be using something like the Get Alby Lightning Wallet browser extension, you can just open that up and it'll automatically detect that you're watching my channel, which is pretty cool. You could send some sats that way. Or alternatively, I will have my Strike account and Lightning address on the final screen momentarily. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave this here. As a reminder, every sat counts. And until next time, I'll see you then.